So my name is Beverly June Howard. I was born in St. Ignatius, Montana, which is out of Missoula. And it's actually close to the Flathead Lake area. Some people are a little bit more familiar with where that is. I was born about 6 weeks early, and I had a twin sister. So my parents did not realize that they were having twins. We were the last of 4 brothers and 2 sisters older than us. And Jean, my twin sister, was born first, and then the doctor turns to my dad and says, "You take care of this one because there's another one coming." And Jean had the cord wrapped around her neck, so they were concerned about her, but fortunately they took care of that. We had to stay in the hospital, which is unusual because most times one of the moms or a midwife would come help deliver babies. But this little town actually had a Catholic hospital, and so we were born in the hospital, and we had to stay in the hospital a good month because I weighed 3 pounds and Jean weighed 4 pounds. Anyway, the house we lived in was a log house that my dad and brothers had built. And I actually don't remember how many rooms were in it, and the bathroom would have been an outhouse outside. We lived there probably till we were almost 3. And then we moved to the Spokane, Washington area. And I'm trying to remember, it's kind of out in what they call the valley. It was called Green Acres. So we lived there. We moved about every year or 2. This was during a really hard time for people. It was right after the First World War. There was a Great Depression. There was a pandemic, and then right on at the beginning of the Second World War. So jobs were really hard for people to come by, and my dad was a rancher or farmer, so we did move quite a bit. So when Jean and I were in kindergarten, we actually did go to school there in the Spokane area. And then in 2nd grade, we moved to another little place just outside of Spokane. 3rd grade, we moved over to the Athol, Idaho area. 4th grade to what is kind of where I ended up staying until I got married, was the Colville, Washington area. And I have written a lot of this down, so the kids have this on paper, but they're bound and determined they're going to have me talk about it.
So what would you say your first most vivid memory was?
Probably when we lived on the dairy, and the reason it was called the dairy is because it was where they milked cows and sold the milk. So I remember my oldest brother would drive the milk truck to deliver the milk, and I remember crawling up into that milk truck with Jean, and we'd kind of sit there and play. So that's one of the first things that I can remember, was while we were living there. Now Jean has a better memory, so she can come up with things that I go, "Oh yeah, I think I kind of remember some of that." So what else do you have on there, Caleb?
Why were you given your first and middle names?
So my name was Beverly June, Jean's was Betty Jean, and we did ask Mother why she named us those names, and she said that over the course of some trips to the temple, some of the names of people that she did the temple work for. One was a Betty Jean and one was a Beverly June. And so that's the reason we got those names, but she called us, or they called us, by our middle name, which is fine, I don't mind that, but that first name sometimes kind of people go, Beverly? And I'm going, oh yeah, that's me. And there was one year in school, I believe it was when we were in 4th grade, that it was, I guess, a rule that you had to go by your first name. So I was called Beverly that year.
What was the neighborhood like that you grew up in?
Very rural, because we lived, and I'm going to talk more about the area we moved when I was in 5th grade, was up out of Colville on a cattle ranch. It was a 5,000 acre cattle ranch. And so, obviously, we didn't have really close neighbors. Actually, I guess I can say there was another ranch up the road, probably about a mile from us, where ours ended and then theirs started. But mostly people just worked. We did not do a lot with neighbors. I think most of our socializing would have been with people at church.
Were there other kids you played with?
Nope, it was just Jean and I and Lily, because the boys were all married and had left home by the time we lived up on this ranch. And then our oldest sister also was married. So there were just the 3 girls. So that's, our playmates were sisters.
So your dad worked on the ranch? Did you see him a lot?
Yeah. He worked on the ranch and we worked on the ranch. Everybody had their chores to do, and the older we got, the more work there was. We had to help haul hay. I fed the chickens and kept them locked up and taken care of. Jean chopped wood. We all carried wood into the house. My dad chopped wood too. There was a big garden. We took care of the garden. And just all the chores. There were milk cows. And my dad tried to teach Jean and I how to milk, but you have to have pretty strong hand muscles, and I was never able to do it. So we would take care of the milk. They had a separator where you would separate the cream from the milk. So we took care of that, and then had to wash the separator because it came apart and had a whole bunch of different little parts that you had to remember how to put that together so it worked right. So we did that. The summertime, normally on the 4th of July, we would start hauling hay. And when we were older, my dad would make the bales around 60 pounds instead of 80 or so. So it was easier for Jean and I to help lift those bales up onto the wagon that we hauled hay in. The sister, just older than us, didn't ever really do much with lifting bales, but when we had a baler, and if the baler had to be pulled with a tractor, she did drive the tractor. And on that particular baler, my oldest brother would come help with that. He and his wife and a couple of kids had moved into another little house on that ranch. So he was helping with the farm work there for a while. He would poke what we call the baling wire in through kind of an apparatus, I don't know what you called it. It would come through, and then I would have to wait until the bale was formed and then tie the wires. And you had to do it quick enough because the hay was just pushing all the way through. So that was hard to learn, but I finally did learn how to do it. I kind of got yelled at a few times because I didn't get the bottom wire as tight as I should, and the bale broke when it hit the ground. So a lot of fun memories, but a lot of hard work, and I am actually really grateful that we were taught to work, because I think that's been a blessing my whole life.
Tell me about your parents. Where were they born? When were they born? And what memories do you have of them?
Okay, my dad was born out of Logan, Utah, in Cache Valley, in Wellsville. Actually, I'm just going to throw in just a little bit of history here, because Peter Mon was sent up to Cache Valley by Brigham Young to settle that area. And I don't know if he was like a stake president or what up there, but he was kind of over that group of people. And he was my dad's grandfather. So when my dad was 9 years old, his family moved to Cardston, Canada. Apparently, there was land available for people who were willing to go up and settle there. So they moved up there. My mother, her parents lived in Nephi, Utah, and had also heard about land being available. And so they actually went up there. My mother was born after her parents moved up there. So that's where my parents met each other, was up out of Cardston, Canada. They lived in a little town called Beezer. And so they met going to church and to the dances that they would have for the young people in their little branch or ward there. And then after they got married, so mother was born in 1901, March 23rd, 1901. My dad was born June 16th, 1898, I believe. I might be off a year or two. So, in fact, I'm thinking of the age difference. I bet it was 1896 that he was born. So that's where they grew up, but they left that area, moved into Montana, and that's why I was born in Montana. I think maybe three of the boys were born in Canada, and then the others were born, the next brother in Washington, the next sister in Washington, then the last three in Montana. I'm seeing a deer up there. We're just looking through it.
Okay. Who was more strict, your mother or your father?
So definitely my dad. He was pretty strict. And I think by the time that the three youngest girls were growing up, he had kind of mellowed quite a bit. But he was raised in a very, very strict environment, and that carried over. My mother was firm. When she asked you to do something, she meant for you to follow through and do that. But I think she kind of softened my dad and would not allow him to beat his children, because when he was growing up, he was actually beat, not just spanked, he was beat upon. Yeah. So yeah, it was a pretty strict environment.
Do you have any vivid memory of something that you were disciplined for? Time you got in trouble?
Well, not from my parents. And if we didn't do what Mother asked us to do in a pretty timely manner, my dad he had a really quick foot, and his foot would be right in our bottom end. Just kind of give us a boot. But one thing that was really hard when I was in first grade, for some reason, this girl had a really brand new pencil, and I'd never had a brand new pencil. And so I took that pencil and said it was mine. And when the teacher found out about it, I actually got spanked right in front of the class. Got set on a stool in front of the class. I decided after that I wasn't going to tell any more fibs. So there's one time I got in trouble.
Parents have a good marriage?
Yes, I think they did. And I'm kind of pausing here because they were not very open about things. When there was something to talk about in regards to money or problems or any intimacy problems or situations, we were always excused. We weren't ever able to be part of that. And I can understand why they did that, but also I think we would have maybe been a little bit more prepared for life had we been involved in more of that. But they had a good marriage. I just remember, because Mother was a little feisty, once in a while she would kind of say something, and I could remember my dad just saying, Berta, her name was Alberta, Alice Alberta. He would call her Berta. He would say, Berta, and she'd kind of look at him, and that was about all he had to say. So I think they did. I'm sure just like any other couple, they had to learn how to get along with each other.
How did your family earn money? You kind of went off of this. But.
Yeah, so money was very scarce, very rare, in fact. My dad, at the end of the year, we would round up cattle, and cattle would be taken to be sold. During the summer, when we weren't hauling hay, we would be up in the forest or the woods cutting down logs, and those logs would be taken to a sawmill, so that was money. I'm going to add right here that the third brother in the family was killed in the Second World War. And after he passed away, the government asked my parents if they wanted a lump sum of money. And I don't understand how that all worked. But my parents opted to take it for their lifetime, a check each month. Mother's check each month was $23 and Dad's was $25. Sometimes that was the only money available. So growing up on a ranch or farm, you don't usually go hungry, and with the garden. So we had the garden, we had our meat, of course eggs from the chickens, milk from the cows. So the things that they would need to buy would be like sugar, flour, those basic things. So there was never a lot of money. And so my mother, I think probably when Jean and I were in 5th or 6th grade, she started driving school bus. And that brought in money. And she said one of the reasons she did is so that they would have enough money for us to be able to finish school. So she sacrificed her time to do that, and it was a mountain road. It wasn't just a freeway or 2 miles down. It was 25 miles into town, one way. And the winters could be pretty bad.
How did your family compare to others in the area? Do you think they were poorer, richer, normal, I guess?
I think I never really felt poor because we always seemed to have enough. A lot of people living in town, of course, had regular jobs, as we consider regular jobs today. So there were kids in the school who had, more have the newest clothes. But I just was grateful for what we had, and so I didn't ever really feel like that I didn't ever have enough. I know that they had to be careful how many trips we went into town because it was 25 miles into town. So we couldn't go to all the football games or basketball games or those types of things. Gina and I sang in our school chorus and the Girls Glee Club and Triple Trio. So we were involved in a lot of the musical things. So in order to get in for even performances that we had at night, my dad, who was at the time either the branch president or in the branch presidency, they would schedule their branch presidency meetings on nights that we had practices, and so we would have just use one tank of gas for several different things. So they really tried to accommodate us, and I think that was another reason Mother drove the school buses, so that there was some extra money to put toward gas. And by doing that, she also was able to finally get an electric stove instead of a wood-burning stove. But this was only after the electricity was actually ran as far up to where we were living. So the first year we lived there on that particular ranch, there was no electricity. So we had to use the coal oil lamps. And of course our heat was wood-burning stoves, and our cooking stove was wood-burning stoves. And because the winters would get really cold, they could be 20 below was pretty normal. Once in a while, 30 below. And consequently, the water pipes would freeze up, so we would have to use the outhouse outside instead of the bathroom that was in the house. So one summer my dad did dig up all those pipes and lower them so that we didn't have to pack water from the creek up to the house for everything that we needed. Can you imagine drinking creek water? We did.
Wow.
All the time.